Welcome to my daily Instagram live. Not to daily, during the week Instagram live, Monday through Friday. And if you are joining later, you will be seeing this on YouTube. We are studying the book of Deuteronomy, and currently we're on chapter 4. So, without further ado, let's get started. First, quick recap of what we're talking about in the book of Deuteronomy. This is following the journey of the Israelites to being led by Moses into the promised land. Although Moses can't fully take them there, he's leading them through the wilderness and preparing them to continue on to their journey into the promised land, in which Joshua will then take over and bring them into the land. So, refer to the previous 3 lives of chapters 1, 2, and 3 if you need some kind of background of what's going on for that. In chapter 4, we carry on into the journey, and Moses basically starts to reveal a lot of the characteristics of God. So we start to get to know what God is like, because Moses firsthand experienced God when he came to him with the 10 Commandments. So I just highlighted some things, and I'm just going to summarize a little bit of what I read so that we could review it and discuss it together. The first thing that I highlighted is where it says, verse 2, do not add to what I command you, and do not subtract from it, but keep the commands of the Lord your God that I give you. So basically, that is something that Moses experienced firsthand, because when God commanded him to get water out of the rock, he added to that. He added the hitting the rock, and he also added to proclaim as the people that were following him as rebels. And God never asked him to do that. And God is very specific with his word. I find that oftentimes when we're reading the Bible, or we're reading the Bible out of context, when we then spread the word to other people, we add our own twist into what we want to say. So it's like God never said that in that way. So we kind of take advantage and we manipulate the word, and that is absolutely forbidden. And there's a reason for that. God is very specific with the way that he wants us to read his word, because it all has meaning behind it. Just like with Moses, the reason why Moses adding to the proclamation of saying that all he had to do was speak to the rock and water was going to come out is because that shows how easy it was for God to fulfill what he was going to say, and for God to have the humans' backs and to feed them and to quench their thirst. All he had to do was just speak to it. Simple. But instead he added, now I gotta hit the rock. And although that might seem minor to you, it's showing that it wasn't as easy and as simple as God had originally intended it for it to be. So do not add or subtract from the word. Also, don't subtract, because it's very often that we start removing scriptures that we don't like what they're saying because it applies to us. It's like a mirror that stares us in the face and we're uncomfortable with it. So we, have selective hearing at that point. So it's very important that if you do speak the word, you say all of it and don't add nothing to it, don't subtract. Then it says, you saw with your own eyes what the Lord did to Baal Peor. You can refer to Numbers 25 verses 1 through 9 to refer to what happened at Baal Peor. But basically all of the people were destroyed. But all of you who held fast to the Lord your God are still alive today. So those that were worshiping Baal were destroyed, and those that held fast to God were spared. Then verse 5 says, see, I have taught you decrees and laws as the Lord my God commanded me. so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to take possession of it. Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about these decrees and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. What are the nations so great as to have their gods near them? By the way, the Lord our God is near us whenever we pray to him. And I wrote that means God is using them as an example for us to come. So it was very important that they carried out the prophecy as it was said, because this is now why we have this book of Deuteronomy, and we have something to follow. We have a historical explanation as to why their journey was the way that it is. And not only that, but why we needed God so much, because they couldn't have done this journey on their own in any way, shape, or form. They were slaying giants. They were conquering land of people that were way more fit to destroy them than they were. But because they had God backing them, they achieved the impossible. And this is a historical account that if that never happened in the way that it did, we would have nothing to refer to the point that we understood the power of God. This is all a way of us getting to know God. And that's why reading the Holy Bible, reading the Word of God is so important, because we can't just say that we believe in God, but we don't know him. So then it says, and then when it said that what other nation is so great as to have God, their God's near them, by the way, the Lord our God is near us whenever we pray to him. Oftentimes it refers in the Bible that when God speaks, he whispers. And I think that is so telling, because that would make you understand, or give you the connotation that if he's whispering, that means he's very close. He's near us. He doesn't have to yell from across the room. It doesn't have to be a big voice that comes down from the clouds and it shakes us, although it very much could be. But sometimes God is speaking to us in very many different forms. He's very close to us at all times. He knows all, and he's just that powerful. So then it says, verse 9, only be careful and watch yourselves closely, so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. So the lessons that we learn, things that we learn about God, we pass them on. We have that responsibility to pass on the word to our children so that they can be prepared. And that's kind of what the Israelites did, to the sense that their children were inherited the possibility of getting into the promised land because of their parents, and not only from just the good things that they did of following God, because remember, they made mistakes to the point that they started to doubt God, and they started to go back on their journey and question whether God was intentional with them, and was setting them up for failure or not. So to the point that they were like, why don't we just go back to slavery? Let's go back to the Egyptians. At least we had food there. At least it wasn't this long journey. At least we didn't have to walk so far. So their children learned from their mistake in that sense too. Moses is very much reiterating that is the reason why your parents are not here. They're not with us because of what they did. So you can teach your children from your own to learn from your own mistakes, rather than them having to experience things firsthand. And that is exemplified here. And then I highlighted verse 13. It says, he declared to you his covenant, the 10 commandments. He's talking about himself, really, Moses. He declared to Moses his covenant, the 10 commandments, but it was for the purpose of the people to know the law, which he commanded you to follow, and then wrote them on 2 stone tablets. And the Lord directed me at the time to teach you the decrees and laws you are to follow in the land that you are crossing to the Jordan to possess. I also find it very important to note here that Moses didn't just give up on his purpose because he learned that he was not, or that he was banished from the promised land. In fact, he accepted that. He said, okay, I understand. He took it like a man, and he continued to teach and to lead. So sometimes the messenger or the person that is teaching you may not be perfect. They may not even be making it into the promised land, but the message was good, and the message that God was giving Moses and speaking through Moses to was good nonetheless, and Moses did not let that waver in his faith. In fact, he regretted what he did, and he knew that he needed to still fulfill his mission regardless of whether he was going to make it or not. And luckily we do have forgiveness, so I'm pretty sure that Moses is going to be rewarded for that. Okay, and then idolatry forbidden. This is such an important section of the Bible, especially of this chapter, because it teaches us about why idols are not to be worshipped, and that it is absolutely abomination to God. And you may see things as innocent, but symbolically they speak very loudly to God. He does not like idolatry at all. So I will read the majority of this because I think it's very important for us to grasp the concept. It says, you saw no form of any kind the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Just that right there. How can we make an idol of God if we don't know what the form he takes is? It says, therefore, watch yourself very carefully so that you do not become corrupt and make yourself an idol, an image of any shape, whether formed like man or woman. We don't know what form God comes in. He may not come in a form of man or woman. It's very important. Or like any animal on earth, or any bird that flies in the air, or like any creature that moves along the ground, or any fish in the waters below. And when you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moons, and the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshiping things the Lord your God has proportioned to all the nations under heaven. So absolutely nothing that God has created, and God has created everything, nothing of that likeness is to be worshipped or to be idolized. Nothing. I think he made it very, very clear. He said, you don't know what type of form that I make. And really, if God wanted us to worship or to celebrate a form that represents him, he would have told us to do so. So for us to take it upon ourselves to make these little Jesus pieces and, whatever, anything really to symbolize God, he never asked for us to do so. So we're just taking matters into our own hands like we usually do. And I've been guilty of that, So yeah, he says not to do that. Where am I at? So not even the sun and the stars. Okay, and then it says why. Verse 24. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. So here we get to know one of the characteristics of God. He is a very jealous God. He admits it. Verse 26, I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you this day, that you will quickly perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped around. Verse 25, after you have had children and grandchildren and have lived in the land a long time, if you then become corrupt and make any kind of idol, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord your God and arousing his anger, I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you to this day, that you will quickly perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. So just as much as I'm leading you to the promised land, if you do the same thing that your parents did, that I showed you, they were punished for. If you make that same exact mistake, you too will be punished. You too will not make it. You will not live there long, but will certainly be destroyed. The Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and only a few of you will survive among the nations to which the Lord will drive you. This is we're getting a look, or we're getting a prophecy, really. He's giving an illusion, or I forget what it's called in literature, but foreshadowing. This is foreshadowing. There you will worship man-made gods of wood and stone, which cannot see or hear or eat or smell. But if from there you seek the Lord your God, you will find him, if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. When you are in distress and all the things have happened to you, then in later days you will return to the Lord your God and obey him. For the Lord your God is a merciful God. Also, we learn he is a merciful God. He will not abandon or destroy you or forget the covenant with your ancestors, which he confirmed to them by oath. So this is a binding agreement, but we also had to carry our end of the bargain. It's not just a one-sided. The covenant is a gift, and there's absolutely nothing that can come in between you inheriting this gift. Absolutely not. He's saying that as long as you don't do this and you do this, it is yours. So it was more of like a contract than just a gift. The idol thing, I think that we don't understand how prevalent it is in our society, to the point that we don't even realize that we're worshiping things. What has your attention over God is something that you are worshiping. So oftentimes I try to encourage others to read the Bible. It's a book that is, I know it's large. The pages are very small. It will be somewhat of an investment of your time to read it. But if you have not yet, why? And usually the reason why is because you want to use your attention on other things. So that right there is showing you that you have some work to do. Because for all that God has done for us, it shouldn't be much for you to invest your time into getting to know him and getting to know why we're supposed to be here. This is his manual that he has for us and his commandment. We spend our time on things that are of this world, rather, because it is more fulfilling our instant gratification, whereas the promises of God are to come later. So we may not necessarily feel them in this lifetime or at this moment. Whereas I do still disagree with that, because I think that if you do follow God, you are rewarded in very many ways than not. And you're prepared to the point that you're not jaded for later. So a temporary discipline will prepare you for your eternity of God. But for some reason, us humans, we don't really think like that. We think we want it now, and we have this emptiness inside of us, and we're looking to fill it with things. And usually those things, well, not usually, all the time, those things are never going to fulfill that desire, because the only thing that can fulfill that desire is God. God is the only thing that can make us feel whole, and we're tricked to believe that that's not the case. So be very careful with that, what you give your attention to. And then also, I will say, I'll give an example. Christmas just passed, right? And I don't celebrate Christmas for personal reasons. I believe that it's not of God. And I've had disagreements with people during that time about the Christmas tree. Because I was like, well, the Christmas tree was intentionally used to celebrate another God. So I refuse to bring that into my house, because I feel like that's a form of idolatry. And usually the response is, oh, well, the tree has been a part of my life since I was a kid, and, it just makes me feel this, and it makes me feel that, and the memories, whatever. And the attachment to that tree is exactly proving my point. It's exactly proving the point of the fact that it's worshipped in a way. It may not look like, when you say worship, a lot of times we think of you're bowing to it and you're praying to it. And that's not necessarily the case, but to the point that it holds you back from focusing on what you should be focusing, which is God and His word for you. That's what shows you that it's really a distraction. So yeah, neither here nor there, but just be very, very careful with the idolatry. And I wanted to spend a lot more time on this because I think that is the most important commandment, to not worship anything other than God, because He is a jealous God. That's, from my understanding of reading the Bible, a sin that is unforgivable. So, or will certainly lead you to death. Maybe unforgivable is not the right word, but it will lead to death, or lead to losing out on your promise. So then I'm going to skip around to so wait, where did I go? Okay, and then God is just telling us about how much He cares about us to even give us this kind of information, to even give us a chance to get to know Him. It says, ask now about the former days long before your time, from the day God created human beings on the earth. This is verse 32, sorry. Ask from one end of the heavens to the other earth. Has anything so great as this ever happened? Or has anything like it ever been heard of? Has any other people heard the voice of God speaking out of the fire as you have and lived? So these people were firsthand experiencing this to the point that it was absolutely undeniable. And no other nations that celebrated any other gods were having this kind of experience. They may have had, because I know that they had like witchcraft, and they had sorcerers that performed some kinds of miracles, but their sorcerers weren't always spot on, nor were they half as powerful as God was. And God went head up with them in Egypt and proved that. So He's like, has anyone else had this experience? Has any other God ever tried to take for himself one nation out of another nation by testings, by signs and wonders, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, or by great and awesome deeds, like all the things the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? And it says, you were shown, verse 35, you were shown these things so that you might know that the Lord is God. Beside Him, there is no other. So there was all a purpose for that. And that is to show us who God is, to show us His power. And then it goes into like the cities of refuge. So this was just like an aside, that if you had unintentionally killed a neighbor without malice, so you're not really guilty of it, but you're in trying times, you have a city of refuge. You could go there because it's like a fleeing situation, so that you don't get killed or punished. And then in the end, it's just basically talking about the law set by Moses, and it is to inhabit over the Israelites. And that is basically it for chapter 4. I'm going to go ahead and open up the discussion to the comment section, and let's discuss. That's what I got out of it. I don't know if you guys would like to add anything to it. Now would be the time. Whoa, I missed a lot of comments. Okay, Fawn says, chapter 4 instructs them to leave certain lands belonging to other tribes alone and what not to do. Idolatry once they enter their land when things go wrong. They will turn back to the real God, not idol. And that happened often. They would do that. So he was warning them. That's why I said it's kind of like foreshadowing, because God knew what they were about to do. It's not like God wasn't prepared and didn't think that these people were going to turn around and start worshiping idols again. He knew it. That's why he kept on having to warn them. But they still failed. Spoiler alert. Can we do the book of Proverbs? I already did the book of Proverbs. If you go to my Instagram TV, the Proverbs series is there. Okay, Cello says, wow, that's interesting now that you mentioned it about Moses not abandoning his purpose, even knowing he would not make it into the promised land. Never thought about it, but it is a great example of faith. Absolutely. And what a selfless thing to do, right? That's how, it's like he really got to know God, and regardless of, he didn't feel entitled to say, well, I'm not going to make it, so forget everybody else. He still was gracious, and although I do feel like he did blame the people as to why he wasn't going to make it, rather than take accountability for what he did wrong, because every single time he mentions that he's not going to make it, he mentions that it's because of you, it's because of the people I will not make it, rather than because I didn't listen and I added into I added more into the instructions than I should have. But remember, Moses was not perfect, and I think that sometimes when you hear about these figures, you think that they were all like Jesus. His disciples absolutely were all flawed. A lot of the people that God used in order to bring his message throughout the nations were flawed in one way or another. They were either murderers, lustful, they hard-headed, drunks, all kinds of things, all kinds of issues. But God still knew that he could use them. And it's important to note that any of God's messengers, even today, are going to be human. And just the word human, we have to understand that encompasses that they're going to be sinners. We're all sinners. None of us are perfect. None of us could ever be or hold a candle to Jesus. We can try. We can repent and strive to be just like God, but our nature is a sinful nature. So oftentimes we're going to fall short. So it is not so much to look at Moses and what he was personally doing as the ultimate example. I'm going to follow everything that Moses does. No, they were following God, and they were following what Moses was telling them God's will was. So they were not to worship Moses, and nor did he ever tell them to worship Moses. It was all about God. Whoa, these comments are going fast. Do I think superhero fandom qualify as a form of idol worship? It really depends. I would just be careful, because, read the word and interpret it as in-depth as possible. Do your research on that. I stay away from a lot of things that I feel like might be a little bit too close to the fence, because I'm just, I don't even want to risk it. But yeah, I don't want to tell you yes or no, because I don't have the answer to that. Only God can give you the answer to that. whether it's by you reading his word or by you praying for discernment. So yes, definitely be careful.